Welcome to another live Q&A. I have a few questions ready to go on my phone over here, this lovely device. Which, by the way, before I get into the questions, I was at this meeting and a friend of mine mentioned that he deleted social media off his phone, all the different social media apps, so that way he can only access it on the browsers. So I did that on Friday, maybe last week. And it's been lovely. It's cut my screen time down tremendously because it's harder to get on, so I just don't end up getting on there. So if you haven't tried, I would recommend doing that. But okay, so now to the questions. Maybe first, just starting with a moment of breathing. I have a bright light for this session. I noticed the lighting in the last session was pretty dark. The issue, though, is that I can't use my glasses because I get this lovely glare. But noticing the breath, there's actually a lovely space in presence where we can feel like we don't really need to know anything. So then questions no longer really are that important, but they can still be helpful. So we'll dive into the first one. Uh, how do you stay present when you feel guilty for the bad things you did in the past? Hmm. Yeah, when I look in my past, I've certainly done plenty of bad things, what I would call unconscious. I mean, sometimes I think about it and it's cringy. Other times it's really painful to look at the things I've done. Um, just to kind of your standard everyday egocentrism, right? That sort of narcissistic main character energy, as they call it. Um, and yeah, I mean, it can sting to kind of look at how we acted in our past. Um, so, of course, an important part of looking at our past is forgiveness. Forgiveness is very important. I'll go into that in a second. But as far as how do I stay present when I feel guilty? Well, really, yeah, it's about if the guilt is showing up, if shame or any kind of like internal reaction that's attached to the past is showing up in me, well, it's showing up in present moment. So then I acknowledge it and I sit with it. And from being present with the feelings, on one level, it's actually not going too much into the story and just being deeply with the feeling, but then also inviting sort of spiritual contemplation can help. Um, and so, uh, self-forgiveness, very important. Actually, one of my first really profound spiritual realizations back in 2012 when my awakening kind of started, before I even realized what was happening, really. But I remember having this profound feeling of like, wow, everyone is doing the best they can with what they've been given, with what they've experienced, with what they've been taught, with all the wounds that maybe haven't been healed yet. Uh, it was just a really strong feeling of like everyone's doing their best. And this included, and I remember at the time, it included my parents, who on one end were loving and on another end were pretty unconscious in different ways. Uh, and people in my past uh, that you might consider, were unconscious towards us, did us wrong, creates that sense of being jaded or not trusting or others and so on. And Uh, yeah, it was just interesting because when I felt that, when I saw or I could see that everyone was doing their best, this like really powerful love feeling came in, and like all this anger I had, all this judgment and anger that I had about all these people in my past. At that moment too, I wasn't even really thinking about me yet. I was just thinking about everybody else. But uh, but yeah, there was just this deep softening, and it's just like, oh. And so Jesus put it as, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And Eckhart says it as, "No one can act beyond their level of consciousness." So if we're just, sometimes it's easier to look at other people first than to look at ourselves. So if we're looking at other people in our past, and we're working on forgiving them, it's just recognizing that every person is in their own states of consciousness. And interesting thing too, in the states of consciousness, it's not like a permanent one level layer. You know, if I look at my experience and you reflect on yours, we we often fluctuate. There are moments where we're peaceful and calm and, being on our good behavior, you might say. And there are other times that we get triggered, that we get upset, that we feel fear or anger or something, and our emotions take over. And in those emotions, we then do things or say things that we really wouldn't normally say and we don't actually mean. Maybe the pain body gets taken over, takes us over. We say something vicious or aggressive, abusive towards somebody, violence. And actually, what helped me forgive other people, though, was seeing how easy it was for me to get lost in reactivity, and in pain, body, and ego. Even as I was spiritually awakening, I still found it difficult to stay out, to not fall into reactivity and all that aggressive energy. So, seeing how easy it is to fall into allowed me to help. It made it easier for me to forgive those who maybe haven't even started their awakening at all yet. And um, And then with myself, though, that's the other key, right? Is forgiving ourselves. And if you look back in your past, when I look back, I know, it's hard to explain, but I just know I was doing my best in that moment with what I had, with what I could see, with what I understood, with my lack of emotional awareness and so on. It was just, yeah, I was trying. And I was failing and I was missing the mark, as it's sometimes put, missing the mark. Um, but all of this too, all of our mistakes of our past lead us to this moment, present moment, which is super important. And if in this moment you can see clearly that a past action was unwise or unconscious, that's enough because it, how does Eckhart say it? He says, only sanity can recognize insanity. So if you look in your past and you feel guilty about something, and really what's under that is you recognize that what you were doing in your past was, um, not the wisest, uh, then now you can see that it wasn't wise. Back in that moment, you didn't see that it wasn't a wise choice. You just saw, or the choices happened through you, or you thought you chose it. Uh, but usually the ones we feel guilty about have to do with reactivity and stuff. But um, or I guess ego, because the ego really is not good at handling power and so on. But so, oh, lost my train of thought. So forgiving yourself is recognizing, oh, I can't act beyond my level of consciousness either. Uh, and but we can realize this in present moment, and we can even appreciate that. What I'm glad that I now see from a sane point of view in this moment, and I can see that what I did before was insane. Oh, and this is tricky. To observe something as insane is actually an important practice. But to do it without personalness, to do it without judgment, you can observe someone else. If you watch the news, you can see there's lots of insanity. Um, or if we look in our past, we see, oh, there were actions that came from our own insanity. Uh, and if you can see that without the judging, though, it's just observation of a truth. And without the personalness, it just is. And then we can kind of wake up out of it even more. Uh, it's when we take it personal and we identify with it. I mean, for one, we're identifying with our past, the mental conceptual realm of the past of thought, and but we're also identifying. Um, oh, my mind just keeps going quiet. No, mind, I need you right now. I guess it's kind of a shortcut actually to how do you uh, how do you stay present with the guilt? Well, be present with the feeling, but also notice how the thoughts, all those thoughts about the past, how they circulate, that feeds a lot of the unnecessary suffering too. Because in present moment, your past isn't here. It only shows up. It only exists if you recall it in the mind. Um, but this is tricky because you can drop the stories. It doesn't want you don't want to suppress the feeling though. So if you can drop the stories, the mental rumination on the past guilt, but then just be really present with the guilt itself, the energy in the body, that whatever that feeling is in the body. That's really most powerful for healing it. But then again, this is where like forgiveness becomes such a key and deep forgiveness. So let's see. Oh, of course, the other important part here in forgiving our past, our unconscious past, is also doing our best not to repeat it, right? Because there's also, if you feel guilty about, I don't know, doing something, calling somebody a name, and then you try to sit with it and you breathe through it and you drop the story and all that and you feel better, and the next day you do the same thing again and you call someone else the same name or the same person, it's like, okay, hold on. We gotta go back to the drawing board a little bit. Um, I mean, an interesting definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. Uh, and so also we could be beating ourselves up with guilt, uh, but then continuing the action, which is really pretty wild. So you want to kind of, acknowledge that too. But if you've created the change and you're not doing the thing you previously felt guilty about, then this is beautiful. And changed action is a very powerful um, uh, forgiveness, really. And oh, another very interesting thing about forgiveness and releasing guilt, nobody is too far gone on the whole planet. As crazy as some of this unconsciousness is out here, it is possible for anyone uh, to find that sort of inner redemption of forgiveness, of, well, one, acknowledging where they made mistakes, creating the change, and then forgiving the past. That's available for anyone, which I find really just also beautiful because, I think sometimes we might think, well, there's certain people that I don't know, they just went too far. And yeah, they've definitely gone pretty far. And those who are really unconscious, ironically, they probably won't um, find the humility to see their own insanity. So it's not really going to be an issue anyway that they're going to get out of jail free too easily. But I do really feel that, like, if someone is ready to acknowledge their part in the messiness of the world, whether it's the past and the present, um, that's available to anyone. And the ability to wake up is available to anyone. Even Eckhart does talks in prisons for the foundation, and he's talking to some people who've made drastic mistakes in their past, murdering people or all kinds of crazy stuff. And a couple interesting things happen here. One, you can see from when he's talking to them or when he's meeting them, he's not meeting them from their past. He's not identifying them with their past. He's meeting them in the present, as the present. And so there's also forgiveness in that. It's just, oh, hello. And uh, so not identifying the person we're not even we're trying to forgive. This just sort of happens in presence, but uh, not identifying them with the past, forgiveness automatically happens. And the opportunity, it kind of calls out our innate good that everyone deeply has, deep down in the deep eye. Um, it it brings that out, and then also the other thing is that there have been a fair number of people that have um, uh, reached out to Eckhart. And actually, I was just listening to a talk about from Ram Dass, who also had worked a lot with people in prisons. And there's a whole, I forgot the name of the program. There's a whole incarceration, finding freedom in prison or something. But the idea here, right, is just that nobody's too far gone. I mean, even people that are actual, actual criminals of sorts can find liberation. And of course, that would include forgiveness of themselves and of everyone in their past. So, yeah, lots of thoughts there on this aspect. Very important part of forgiveness practice, though. And even, I mean, when we're looking at feeling guilty about the bad things in our past, that could be really big things in our past, or it could also be really small stuff like we're just trying to be more present each day. And every time we slip and we have a little moment of reaction or a little moment of our ego coming out, that is also just as important to forgive. Uh, that took me a while to realize because I was very hard on myself. I was trying my best to become more and more present, more awakened, more conscious, be the light in the world, all that stuff. And I had good intentions, but I was also like, there was such an effort and a striving that I wasn't quite finding the grace and the the love that comes in with presence, where it's like uh, it's a feeling like we're right where we're supposed to be. There's this love of a like just letting everyone be just as they are, including ourselves, which also includes our moments of mistakes, even recent mistakes, even 10 seconds ago. Maybe let's say you have a negative judgment about me, the mind does. All right. Okay, it's fine. It's just the mind, you know. But if somewhere in us we go, oh no, I shouldn't be having a negative judgment about Ryan, then that's that extra layer of unforgiveness that makes it just all more complicated. Yeah. So, okay, that's enough for that one. Although, really, it's a huge subject to keep going in on. One more thing I'll just add is the sense of guilt is a form of suffering. Uh, and so, just looking at it, oh, there's some suffering here. There's resistance. There's discomfort. Um, this isn't of presence. Presence is of peace and all the stillness, equanimity, but you can bring the presence into the suffering and then meet it compassionately with the suffering, and then it softens, it heals um, more and more. It's very freeing to uh, let go of the past. Okay, second question. Hey Ryan, I'm reading The Power of Now, and I'm really struggling with the whole be the observer thing. I feel like I'm not quite understanding and can't figure out how to disconnect with the thoughts running through my mind. Any tips? Is it just like noticing when your mind starts getting chatty? Like, oh, there goes my thoughts again. Well, let's each person watching right now just check in, notice any thoughts happening. So with being the observer, you might say the first stage, the first layer is just noticing what's happening. If thought is happening, okay, then you're noticing it. If the voice in the head is chatting away, then you're just aware. Oh, there's the thoughts. Just like the questioner asks, it's like, oh, there goes my thoughts again. Yeah, in a way. Although, if you notice, if so, as the observer, though, where there's this quiet listener, and then any content, any activity that shows up is witnessed, which includes thoughts about the thoughts. That's the second layer. So you hear a first thought, and then if you have the commentary of like, oh, there goes my thoughts again, that thought there is a second layer, um, commenting on the first layer. Or what often happens is you were observing thought, and maybe we catch a little vicious negative one, a mean judgment about somebody, and and then we have a second layered thought that goes, oh no, oh, I shouldn't be thinking so harshly, or I'm not doing good in my practice, or whatever, right? So it's like a judgment is judging the judgment. Now, the observer, though, is just witnessing the whole dance of wherever the mind is going. Uh, and so even if the only thing you do notice is, wow, my mind is busy, this is still great. That was actually one of the first parts of my own awakening. It wasn't that the mind dissolved, it was that I was reading The Power of Now, and I suddenly became aware of the voice in my head that was reading the words. And I was like, oh, this is what he's talking about. And I could hear myself kind of saying this in my head. That awareness that suddenly kind of turned on, uh, that's kind of the initial awakening. Uh, Now, to the part of like with this questioner of not quite understanding it, um, uh, the full understanding of the observer is when our identity shifts completely into being the observer and not in the mind. Uh, that's the full understanding of the observer uh, practice, because the observer is also presence. It's your, uh, it's just this unbiased, loving awareness. Ram Dass calls it loving awareness. It's a nice quality to it. It just is and is emanating your attention, uh, prior to opinion, prior to past ideas, concepts, just the witnessing presence of you listening right now, unconditioned. Uh, the full understanding of the observer is when we know ourselves to be the silent presence, not the content of the mind. So that's the second step of understanding the observer is shifting identity. Uh, Now, of course, too, one of the trickiest things about exploring this kind of deep spiritual practice and path is the mind, our thinking mind, can only go so far before it starts to like get all confused and like even maybe uncomfortable, because the truth is like the mind won't be able to understand the observer. The Our conditioned human intellect, the thing that we've practiced for most of our lives through schooling, much schooling, and all this conversation and all this thinking we've done over our lives. Oh, had a little technical moment there. Okay. But all this thinking uh, has added to this belief, that this deep belief that we have, that the way to understand is through thinking, through this rational mind, logical mind. And so this is what we do. But then you come across a book like The Power of Now, and he's inviting us to get out of the mind. And then the mind's like, whoa, hold on, what? It just doesn't make. And so all our conditioned belief is, oh, I got to use my mind to figure out what this means. But the thing that we're trying to understand is actually trying to help us out of that very pattern. So it's very tricky. Um, uh, But again, coming back, let's come back to practicing in the moment. Notice again what thought is happening, if any. And then, if there is no thought happening, then two things are possible. One is you're in the state of presence. If there's no thought, there's just pure presence. It tends to be a very lovely feeling. The other possibility, though, interestingly, if we don't hear any thoughts when we check in, is that it's possible that thoughts are happening, we just don't realize it. And it's actually the thoughts happening without us realizing it. That's one of the definitions of ego. It's when um, our mind is happening in the shadows of our own awareness, and that's where it's very destructive. Uh, So often in meditation practice, the practice is to first strengthen awareness, to strengthen our light on whatever thoughts are going on in us, no matter how good, bad, or ugly it might be. Just shining the light on it, just seeing it, as it is. And okay, maybe that was a accidental hand raise. So, uh, so yeah, this is one of the paradoxes of observing the mind is that we start to catch more and more deeper layers uh, that we didn't even realize were there before. And how this showed up in me as well. Um, when I was first getting into these teachings, I was focused a lot on quieting the mind, and there, a certain degree, it was really blissful and peaceful. It was lovely when I could just. But then I go throughout my day, driving, being at work, going back home, dealing with relationships, and I would just totally lose this sense of like peaceful ease and calm and spaciousness. And I didn't know why, and it was strange because my body was experiencing suffering, but in my mind I was telling myself that like I'm aware of my thoughts, and oh, and uh, and that my mind is quiet. But the suffering was actually saying, no, no, your mind is not actually quiet. The suffering was direct evidence of where thought was happening below my radar of awareness, basically. And so then I brought attention to the suffering, and that helped me to look and expose deeper layers of thought that I had going on that I didn't realize, deeper beliefs, judgments, all that kind of stuff. And so that's why a lot of my teachings and a lot of when I do mentoring and so on, so much of the emphasis is on, okay, let's look at our suffering. Because that really, if you want to do your best to not have blind spots, um, looking at suffering is a very powerful way to do it. How the Buddha recommended it too. Um, okay, so going back to the question though, step one, notice the thoughts. If thoughts are happening, just notice them without judgment, without adding more thought. We're just practicing strengthening this awareness that, oh, the mind is happening, the thoughts are happening. And uh, then the second layer, which can happen, it can take a little while or it can take a very long time before the second layer happens. This is where identity shifts and we start to really feel that we are the silent observer and not the mind, content, and the talker. And the more we know ourselves as a silent observer, you could say the more awakening is happening. But again, this knowing is not conceptual knowing, it's an embodied feeling. And it comes with a lot of peace and stillness and equanimity. Let's see. So, did you have a question? Oh, okay. Yeah, hello. For sure. Yeah, and I'll repeat it because of my recording doesn't. I don't think it picks up on your question. Um, but so the feeling is that this observing practice and trying to quiet the mind also feels like an activity of the mind, and so it feels like a it's like an incompatible paradox. Okay, so yeah, yeah, it's understandable to kind of see it in that way. Um, so let's say for in this moment, right, becoming present again. Uh, Instead of focusing on the mind, just notice the sounds of present moment. There's my voice talking, but then there's also other sounds in your space, and just noticing them. And in in the noticing, as you're hearing a sound, uh, is the mind needed to experience the sound? So you can hear a sound and maybe even see if you can let go of labeling, knowing what it is. Let's say you're hearing my voice, right? And oh, that's Ryan talking. So instead, letting go of that label, that mental label, and then you're just hearing my voice almost as a sound, though, just sound. And in the moment of just hearing, uh, there's no thought. Right after that, thought comes in, uh, even to try to understand what I'm saying. It's like, well, the mind's like, oh, wait, hold on, what? So basically, going the observing state and presence are they look very close together, uh, but with the observing, when we observe the mind, some space opens up. So there's the mind happening, and maybe even the thoughts of oh, this observer is also just mind happening. Okay, then you see that. Oh, that's a thought too. But in just the witnessing, there's a space between the content, the stimulus, the ideas, and your witnessing presence, the part of you that's just taking it all in. There's a space between. So, in the moment of observing the mind, uh, there's observer and there's mind. But then, even this the slightest thought of like, oh, isn't this of mind too? Well, that's where the mind. That's when you want to step back again. It's just a it's hard. It's really hard to talk about. But you step back again, and you go, oh, and it's sort of, oh, that's an interesting idea. Uh, maybe it's right. Maybe it's wrong. Maybe it's who knows. And then that one goes, and then what else comes in? Right, something else maybe. But in the moments that thought isn't coming in too, that's an interesting thing to pay attention to. Uh, in a moment of not knowing, the mind is kind of suspended, and what's left? Uh, or you could say, whether the mind's happening or the mind subsides, where are you? where are you in that experience of the thoughts happening? You're observing the thoughts, and then you even have the thoughts about the whole complexity of it that might be, all be in the mind. And where is I? Where is me in that? Let's see. Oh, I tried to unmute you. If you wanted, if you have anything. Exactly. Yeah, and so I just noticed that this is normal. This is what we've been taught our whole lives. To understand is to go through logic, to to grasp, to be like, ah, yes, now I get it. To finally, get that feeling, like if you're learning an equation in math. But that's the tricky thing about this particular subject, that ah, I get it feeling is silent. It's not of concept. Yes, that's one way of putting it. Yes. Basically, yeah, that's a way of putting it. Um, and this is where, if the mind isn't going silent, this is okay. Then you're just practicing being the witness, because the witness itself is already silent. Uh, the part of you that notices the thoughts that are happening, that part of you that's noticing is that quiet that we seek, is the stillness, is the presence. It's like that's what's funny. We're way closer to it than we realize. It's not. It's not 10,000 meditation hours away or anything. It's actually been here the whole time. It's so quiet. It's so easy to overlook, or it's so easy to lose. Um, does that help? Beautiful. Thank you for your question. So, yeah, and then this is something that has just slowly, mm, I guess you could say, made more sense, but over years of practicing and studying. Um, it's like in the moment that I was reading The Power of Now, it made sense, but there was no way I could have explained it. And now I'm trying to explain it. But uh, but there's just something too about the more we practice deepening our awareness, the that shift into knowing ourselves as the silent presence just becomes a little more and a little more, um, almost obvious, or uh, undoubtable. And with that, I find peace grows. So you also know if you're onto something, if more healing is happening, less reactivity, and more sense of like being content. Because that's another lovely quality of our presence. That silent, observing presence is this feeling of like everything right now is okay, including the busy mind. So if the mind is busy, eh, okay, it's fine, no problem. For like a couple years at least, maybe 5, 6 years in my meditation journey, it took me a while to realize that a great meditation often was just me ending it with realizing like, oh man, my mind is way busier than I realized. And at first I would consider that a failure, but then no, came to realize that's a good thing because I'm aware. Before that, my mind was going, I just had no clue. And so that's when it's most destructive, right? When the mind is going and we're just not aware of it. So just increasing awareness. Anytime you can stop and go, oh, why am I thinking about that right now? What do I need to think about? X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. Um, Part of what we're training here is we're kind of training to master the mind in a way that we use it when we want to, and we put it down when it's not needed. And no extra uh, stuff is going on, which creates so much suffering. Um, when my mind was more unruly, I would just get caught up in so many dramas in my mind. And, I'd be taking a shower, but I wasn't really experiencing the shower. I was in my head replaying an argument I had with somebody, earlier in the day or at work or whatever, and getting all worked up and not being present with the shower. So, small example though, I could have just been enjoying the shower, but instead I was in some form of suffering. And um, so so even if, let's say, I'm in the shower, I catch my mind is running off into some drama, then I could even go, oh, do I want to continue this thought pattern, or do I want to let it go and be more present with the experience of the shower? And so then more conscious choice comes in, where we can catch the mind when it's running off, and we become aware of it, and we're like, oh, there's the mind going again. And then, is this thought serving me, or can I put it down for a moment and just be more present, with whatever is in front of us right now? It's this video. But then the video ends and we are off doing other things. And, actually, thought observation practice to me is something I practice continuously. From moment of being awake to going to sleep, it's always on, this awareness of what's going through my mind. Uh, and for years, that was the intention, but my mind was going so everywhere, it was very difficult to catch. But then eventually, it's like I was able to stay aware of it more, and then even experience the cessation or have an off switch, which is nice because then it's just. But that didn't happen overnight. Um, and I think it's important to. Oh, I actually hear that a lot in social media. People that start meditation practices and they get disappointed or uh, they lose their momentum because they feel like they're supposed to have supposed to be quieting their mind and it's not working. And what I usually respond with is like, well, hold on, slow down. Quieting the mind is a very advanced practice. Uh, it's not something that you tend to do, on your first um, attempts of meditation. It's sort of like, starting to walk like half a mile a day and then wanting to run a full marathon. It's just not, it's probably not a good idea. And um, so, yeah, the whole quieting the mind is one of my favorite subjects, but it's also like, I think it's very helpful to hear that, yeah, it's a very deep, it's a very advanced practice. Um, but also, there's another important thing. Just if somebody's, let's say, just beginning, never meditated before, and they're just hearing this video and exploring, oh, what is meditation even about? An important thing in spirituality, in true spirituality, is that someone with a very advanced practice, who has an off switch, who lives in peace all day long, oh, and someone who has no peace, no meditation, has no idea what they're doing, um, they're still equal. That's very important. Oh, they're still equal. The person who has never explored meditation before, and the person who's, you might say, a master at it, very advanced in meditation. From a spiritual view, from a true view, they're equal. There's no superiority at all. That's also important. Of course, when spiritual people who have what they think is advanced practices kind of feed on that sense of power, their ego gets inflated, and it really ruins the teachings, and it turns into cults and all this messiness because they they fed on the idea that they were superior just because they are more knowledgeable in spirit, or maybe have certain practices that are fairly advanced. I would argue though anybody who gets lost in the ego doesn't have that advanced of a practice really. They might have a good talk, but if they don't have a walk, then they're also suffering, and that's unfortunate. But that's a whole different subject. But anyway, just to pointing out too, like acknowledging quieting the mind's very advanced practice, but for someone who's just beginning, um, there's nothing wrong with just beginning. It's beautiful. It's just as important to begin as it is to master. And some people that think they're very advanced really need to go back to the beginning. There's all kinds of traps along the way in spiritual awakening, in enlightenment, in meditation. Um, and one big one that I was given this book by a monk. I went to this wedding. My godfather had a wedding at a monastery, and this monk gave me a book, and it was called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And I never even read the book. The title of the book just blew my mind. Oh, because uh, the importance of no matter how advanced we get in our practice and in our um, awakening and depth and realizations and all that beautiful things, it's so important to keep the humility of a beginner and to keep the openness of a beginner, because a beginner is wants to learn and isn't so full of ideas. There's a lot of space for new insights and points of view, and there's that curiosity. And someone who becomes more advanced can fall into that very alluring trap of thinking they already know. And guys often do this. They want to be teachers. We start teaching um, uh, and convincing ourselves that we're already, way ahead. Meanwhile, suffering's happening underneath inside of us, and it's just a big mess. It's happened in religion for thousands of years. But um, so the humility, even if we become advanced, if and when you do find this very powerful place of having the off switch and being no mind, you enjoy it, but it like doesn't make you special, I guess is another way of putting it. Like we're still all equal here. uh, okay, so yeah, lots of stuff on that one. That's a very big subject too. I mean, it's really a fundamental of awakening. You could go further into it as well with the I am, um, the presence that all these beautiful spiritual teachers of the past, the ancient teachers like Buddha and Jesus and Lao Tzu, uh, they touch deeply into this present space, the I am, the same space that you and I are are stepping into. They're, they were very deeply in. Um, Now, I can't walk on water, so I wouldn't say I've got touched as deeply as Jesus has. He could break the reality of physics. That's a pretty far out level. I don't know, but I can say that uh, tapping into this deep space of presence has allowed me to deepen my ability to love, which I would attribute to Jesus, and forgiveness, like forgive them for they know not what they do, which I mentioned at the beginning. That profound forgiveness, it's in the deep I. Well, Eckhart calls it the deep I. It's in that quiet presence that's within all of us. And so coming to sort of like inviting it into our world, into our experience, whenever we are able to be still and observe, even if the mind's busy, but being able to observe it, uh, we're inviting that very deep uh, part of ourselves that's connected to everyone else, so on. But that's also very tricky because, sometimes somebody has a profound experience and then they go around saying, I am Jesus and reincarnated. And they go on a big spiritual trip about that. And that doesn't help either. So that's where no specialness is also important. On one end, it is profoundly beautiful and sacred. On the other, though, it's very beautiful to be no one in particular, just a loving presence, not building up the self in some extravagant ways. Um, okay, I got one more question here. Okay, a friend messaged me. Thanks, Ryan, for your response. My question was because I was in a state of presence for 2 years. I felt a lot of peace after a medical incident, but then I joined a Buddhist school and lost the sense of peace that I had. All spiritual practice became a competition. The ego came in through the back door. Where did that peace I used to live in go? I've tried to regain some of that peace with Eckhart's teachings and with your help. It seems that Eckhart realized that he had found a state of spiritual peace that I hadn't. Okay, so yeah, this is something that took me a while to figure out. Is Eckhart had a very, very rare form of awakening that I think all of us crave, but very few of us ever actually get to taste. And that is an awakening that's instant and permanent. Uh, at 29, he had if you it's in the power at the beginning of the power somewhere in the power now. I think it's in the beginning. He was in a depressive state. He then became aware of the voice in his head, and, uh, and there was a deep surrender. And the next morning, he wakes up and he's in this profoundly awakened presence state. And for months after that, he was in such a bliss he could barely function, and he even kind of you could say became homeless in a sense. Um, he was so kind of off the charts in this realm of conscious experience, and uh, and then went 20 plus years just kind of floating around, being with different teachers, trying to understand what happened to him before he became a teacher. And from what I've gathered, he didn't experience much fluctuation. He didn't fall back into suffering. He didn't fall back into the chaotic, busy mind and into reactivity and judgment of others and all that jazz. Oh, excuse me. He just kind of stayed awake. And oh, that would be really lovely if all of us could just have that. What's also interesting was he wasn't even seeking it. Oh, apologies, I'm having some technical glitch here. But interestingly, too, he wasn't even seeking this awakening. It just happened. Um, so I'm saying all this though because the questioner, says it seemed like Eckhart found something a bit different, and I don't know. It almost seems like something found him, and he was just the right host for it. He was just the right being, the right person to be able to hold such a power without getting corrupted by it. Uh, because he hasn't turned the teachings into some giant cult mess like other spiritual teachers have. And I think that does say something about his something with him. But anyway, all of that said, my own experience and everyone that I personally know, including like hundreds of people on Eckhart's social communities, we all go through a slower process of awakening. We have glimpses of profound states, and this could vary from each of us. Uh, but then we crash. The ego comes back in. Uh, our old stuff, our pain body comes back in. All the messiness of being human, you might say, uh, is then we kind of battle against to try to wake up out of. And this was my experience. I had the taste in 2012, and sure enough, though, my ego was still happening, and the pain body was really strong. And it took quite a few years to really work through all that jazz before I would say I was experiencing a pretty consistent state of peace, a consistent state of awakening. Um, and so this is integration. You might say a path of integration, where we go through ups and downs, and it's very bumpy and it's very, I'd say, difficult. Um, it requires a tremendous amount of like awareness and humility and practice and dedication. Um, but I can also say that with the right combination of such and guidance, it works. Uh, thanks to Eckhart. Uh, his teachings, along with other teachers, helped me to find a stable space where, um, I worked through those ups and downs, and then got back to that place that I think everybody really deep down wants is just like consistent equanimity. The so for this person who mentioned this, yeah, I do think Eckhart had something a little different. I don't know why. The only other teacher I know of that had something that extreme is Ramana Maharshi, and he was only like 14 when he got struck by some divine grace or something, and he just kind of went on to a whole other level. And there probably are others, but these are the two that I'm confident of having had such an experience. But I know we have to work with what we are given and what we experience, and that's our path. Maybe it's our karma, maybe it's I don't know. It almost doesn't matter why. What matters is, okay, what's my predicament? And this is what I have to work with. So if you find yourself losing peace and having to do all this tough inner work, okay, then that's what it is, and that's what we have to work with. And but I do also know that it is possible to regain the peace. Um, oh, also, this questioner mentions that they kind of slipped after they joined a Buddhist school and got caught up in the competitive ness of spirituality. There's interesting insights in that. But I would also just point out, I think it's interesting is that didn't happen by accident or by punishment or anything. We go through what we need. Um, and so, or as Eckhart says, life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. So apparently for you, part of your curriculum was falling into the spiritual ego trap a bit of the Buddhist competition realm. I mean, not all Buddhists are in that either. I know some Zen Buddhists, for example, who are not in that competitiveness, but a lot of them are because it's just ego. I mean, ego is everywhere. You know, it's in the normal human stuff. It's in the spiritual stuff. It's all over the place. Um, that's part of what makes it so difficult to integrate presence into daily life is the world around us is still swimming in so much ego. But that's okay. It's just what is. And we have to work with it and we have to keep uh, fine tuning our own practice and so on. But I do know from my experience, and I'm quite sure for everybody, the potential to get back to that state of liberation is always available for us. Um, and sometimes we have to lose it for a little while, and then ironically we suffer because we've lost it, and then that suffering uh, eventually brings us back, back to uh, rel- being willing to let go of our inner egos, being willing to let go of that tempting fruit of thinking I'm superior to the Buddhist person who, does this, that, or the other, because they're claiming they're so advanced and senseis and all that jazz, but they don't know how to quiet the mind. And I go, oh, I know how to quiet the mind. I feel more powerful because I'm advanced, right? This is ego. And this is just the littlest bite of that kind of fruit can really take us take us places. And at first you think you're winning. It feels good when you get an ego boost. It's like, powerful. But wisdom, we recognize it always leads to suffering. Um, and so when that suffering comes and it wakes us up kind of harshly, then the humility, oh, I slipped again. Whoops. Okay. Okay, back to surrender, back to being nobody, rather than powerful or important and stuff. And yeah, it turns out in my own journey, life really has given me just the right combination of things consistently to deepen my practice, to make me, you might say, more immune to the ego is maybe a way of putting it too. The more we get lost in the ego and then wake up out of it, more wisdom is created by, oh, I know that trap, or oh, I know not to bite that fruit, you know? And so you just keep learning. And in that way, these losses are not bad. They're not problems. They're not meant to be judged as you made some horrible mistake. They're just lessons. They're just prerequisites. Um, and that's beautiful. It's beautiful too. So for you, I do hope you come back to this piece, find it again right now, and it's here and it's available. And it might take some of those humbling moments of seeing where we fell into the ego, which goes back to the first question of how do we kind of forgive our past. Sometimes we look at our past even once we're on the spiritual awakening path, and we realize, oh, I was in more delusion than I realized, or I was in more ego than I realized. Maybe some patterns of narcissism or um, superiority ego game or all kinds of stuff. And to be able to just gently observe that and even love it and just, whoops, okay, well, lesson learned. Right? Because again, No one can act beyond their level of consciousness, and this includes me 5 minutes ago, 5 days ago, 5 years ago, 5 seconds ago, and even right now. I can't act beyond where I'm at. uh, Although I'm grateful to be where I'm at because there's, if 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 this whole path wasn't leading towards the gifts of spiritual practice, of peace, of equanimity, of um, healthy relationships, of fulfilling sense of purpose in life, of all these different qualities, then yeah, what's it even worth? But it turns out, yeah, spiritual practice isn't just about being spiritual. It's a tremendous gift as we keep deepening into it. And you take those hard hits of the humility, but you really underneath you recognize like it's a gift. It's not a punishment. It's a kind of like a reward to offer us um, even deeper peace and joy and all the lovely qualities. So okay. Nice. Take a moment. Take a moment. Doing a lot of talking. So you get a moment of silence.